Well, hello again. I'm going to do something very different here, and I'm not sure how long it will be, as I anticipate that it could turn into two, maybe even three different videos. I'm going to delve into the United States Constitution, which can be a challenge as it was originally drafted in the 18th century, and we're in the 21st century. Our Constitution is only 8,000 words, while the average Constitution globally is 22,000 words. And I pulled much of the information from courtsqz.com. And as their information was quite good, and I can certainly identify with their ideas, back to the Constitution. One of the major issues with it is that it's very difficult to alter. It requires a two-thirds majority in both the House and Senate. And as a sidebar, this is one of the biggest challenges to our government. We're very divided, and many of our politicians are out of touch with reality. Basically, this is medieval, not to mention that our Constitution was created by slave owners. We need to eliminate the Electoral College. It's a manipulative and convoluted process of weighing votes for an allowance or an adjustment made in order to take account for special circumstances or compensate for a distorting factor. For instance, each vote in Wyoming, in the state with the smallest population, which is less than 1 million people, carries 4 times the weight of a voter than it does in California, which contains a population of nearly 40 million people. For example, one senator in California represents 950,000 people, almost a million, while a senator in Wyoming represents 17,000 people. This is not good legislation and needs to change. And it's a covert way to insert a contrary weighting scheme to eliminate the total vote count, which honestly is the only way to tabulate votes. The electoral vote process simply provides an advantage to the smaller states. And I do realize that the larger states would dominate the actual vote tabulation, but why would the reverse be an equitable system? As many of the votes in the more heavily populated states become meaningless. And what does this say to the voter who voted for Hillary versus Trump that won by nearly 3 million votes? And a presidential election could be decided in the House of Representatives, which translates to, what was the point of the frickin' election? In an answer to this problem, eliminate the Senate, have the House represent our country, where the representation is somewhat balanced by congressional districts. By somewhat, I mean that the good old Republican Party has been gerrymandering these districts for decades to manipulate the district votes in their favor, most commonly by altering the ethnic composition of the districts to do what they do best, obtain as many white votes as possible, which is their party line. Next up, gun laws, the Supreme Court, which has little to do with the word supreme, since 9 people on the Supreme Court is a freaking joke again. We should have at least 15 or more judges on the Supreme Court. And the president should have no say in their selection. That should go to the House. And once again, here's an idea that never seems to occur in our stagnant government. How about ratifying something in our Constitution? And one could ask, how many ramifications have there been since our nation was formed? There have been more than 11,000 amendments proposed, and this dates back to, I think, 2020. And there have been only 27 ratifications, which to me seems very lame. To boot, these 27 ratifications date back to the beginning of the Constitution, which was 1789. And what about term limits? Not going to happen. I'm going to keep repeating this, not going to happen a lot here, which is a dire mistake. Representatives become predictable, stagnant, and lazy. And what about establishing prerequisites for entry into politics, as there are none? Yes, none, which makes no sense to me, to avoid voting in psychopaths such as Donald Trump and George Santos. Not going to happen. And what about lobbyists and big money influencing many political decisions? And this is probably the most notorious fault in our government. Not going to happen. What about legislating strict gun laws, or at least making it a concerted effort into making it extremely difficult to acquire guns? Not going to happen. And what about creating national abortion rights? Fortunately, this is handled statewide, so we do applaud that at least. Some people have proposed breaking the country into 2 separate countries, blue versus red, but that would be a tremendous amount of work and has a very minute chance of happening since we both need each other. And continuing on, too much power is given to unelected and unaccountable judges, and it can be argued that the growth of presidential and federal power has not been sufficiently constrained, and that constitutional rights and states' rights are subsequently not sufficiently protected. It is also difficult to amend citizens' rights not fully protected. The formal amendment process is torturous in our nation as it requires a supermajority in both houses and then ratification by three-quarters of state legislatures, which means that 13 states can block any change, which creates a rather devastating scenario. Also, there are too many checks and balances, which leads to power struggles between the executives and the legislative, causing a weak government, difficulty in making decisions, and inactivity. We have plenty of that. And here are examples of citizens' rights not being protected. The Japanese internment in camps during World War II. The Patriots Act allow surveillance, allowing torture in Guantanamo Bay with no habeas corpus. Gun laws are very weak. Too much power to excuse me, to unelected and unaccountable judges. Look at what happened in the last 6 to 8 years with our Supreme Court. It turned into a political game. So next, I want to share some of the lyrics in the song Winter in America by Gil Scott-Heron as he sums up his perception of the Constitution. And here goes. I'm not going to sing it. The Constitution, a noble piece of paper with free society. Well, they struggled, but they died in vain. And democracy is ragtime in the corner, and I see robins perched in barren treetops, watching last-ditch races marching across the floor, and like the peace that filtered in our dreams that never had a chance to grow. Time when all the healers people have done been killed or been betrayed, say, but the people know there's something wrong. Hey, it's winter. It seems like winter in America. The truth is there ain't nobody fighting because, well, nobody knows what to save. Oh, sister, save your babies. People know there's something wrong. And if you get a chance to listen to the tune, it's an interesting song. Okay, I'm going to stop here and I will continue with this subject matter in the next video.